Hey guys, Ike here from Mike'sOutdoors.com. Today I'm here to talk to you about the changes I've seen in hunting and archery in the last 30 years. Okay, so this is my 30th year of hunting deer. I started out when I was 12 and now I'm 42. So we're going to deer season number 30. And a few days ago I was talking to Kyle, the guy that I hunt with, about changes in things we've seen in the last few years, because this is my 30th year and I'm kind of going backwards as far as technology goes. You know, I'm going back to my old side lock muzzleloader. I thought that would be cool to do on my 30th year. I'm going back to an older traditional cut on contact broadhead, just like I started out with. You know, just some changes that I thought would be cool for my 30th year as a hunter, to kind of go back to my roots. And we got to talking about the changes that I've seen in 30 years of hunting. He's been hunting for about 5 years now, so he hasn't seen a bunch of changes, but I've seen a lot of changes in 30 years. And I'm sure some of you guys out there that have been hunting, you know, 10 years, 20 years, even guys longer than me, I'd love to hear what you guys have seen. But I've seen a lot of changes in 30 years. So we're going to go over that. You'll see me glancing down at my phone every now and then, because I got a big old long list of stuff on here, so I can keep track of what all I am talking about and haven't talked about. So you see me looking down at my phone every now and then. And I may even break this into 2 videos, because it may end up being that long, especially if I ramble like I'm doing right now. Okay, so one of the biggest changes that we saw were in the bows and our setups. In '91, when I first started hunting, bows were what we called vertical limb bows, or straight bows. The limbs on the riser was here, and the limbs came out pretty much straight. Some of them had recurve to them, some of them had a little bit of a back lean to them, but nothing like what you're seeing today, where they're past parallel and they come out of the riser, you know, off of the riser at just a really sharp angle. And that has really made our bows faster, quieter, and just more vibration free. It really took the vibration out of some of those bows. If you shoot a modern bow and then go back to a vertical bow, the difference in the vibration is crazy. That's why a lot of those old bows you'll see will have rubber things all over them. They'll have rubber stabilizers, they'll have rubber on the limbs, they'll have cat whiskers on the strings. You know, they even made little rubber deals for your sights and for your grip, and for to go around your quiver, and they even did deals that went around your arrows, just all kinds of deals to take away that vibration and that noise. And one of the biggest things that they've done to really combat is these parallel limbs and these past parallel limbs. And that was a huge step up. Another thing that really has changed in our setup on bows is nowadays we have carbon arrows. Back when I first started, everybody shot aluminum. Where I was I remember first carbon arrows I remember are the Beemans, and the Beemans were really, really expensive and really hard to get. And then Gold Tip really broke through the field with a cheap, affordable arrow that was a good, high quality arrow, and that a guy like me could get my hands on. So carbon arrows were not something that we had when we first started hunting. We had these big, heavy aluminum arrows, and we had these bows that you were lucky if they IBO'd 300 feet per second. So by the time you're shooting this full length heavy aluminum arrow, you know, you might be getting 220, 230 feet per second if you're lucky. So what guys started doing was going with these lighter weight arrows and going with an overdraw. And what the overdraw would do is you could use a lighter weight arrow, but it would make it stiffer, and it was lighter because it was shorter. I remember shooting at a 27.5 inch draw. I had an overdraw at one point where I was shooting a 24 inch, like 1916 or something like that, just a super small aluminum arrow, cut really short, and it was stiff enough to handle the draw weight because of the shortness of it. But I was literally shooting, when I would come to full draw, that arrow was setting about back here where my wrist was, or the front, or where my tattoo starts, right there in that area of my forearm, because it was so short. So those overdraws were trying to get us speed out of those super heavy arrows, but they were also really, really dangerous. So that was how we had to set our arrows up and how we had to set our bows up to get the maximum speed out of them. The other thing that we didn't have back then, and you didn't see very much of, was an expandable broadhead. and that was due really just to poor design. Some of them were actually designed okay, but we weren't pushing enough kinetic energy and momentum to make them open accurate consistently. So an expandable broadhead was just a thing that was looked down on. No one I knew shot an expandable broadhead until about 10 years ago, or whenever they started really becoming reliable and stuff like that. We shot the 2-blade cut-on contact heads. I shot a lot of different brands of these 2-blade cut-on contacts just like this. They were good, tough, reliable heads. They'd been around since Fred Bear's days, and they were bulletproof. I remember when the Muzzies came out. When the Muzzies first came out, they were a replaceable blade broadhead. There were a few others out there, but the Muzzies were tough. They had that bone-breaking chisel point on them, and they were just a new, really cool broadhead. And that was really what we shot back then, because expandables just were not reliable at all. So that was something that we did that was different then. Of course, something else I've got here on my list is bows were just a lot slower back then. I remember my dad buying an XI. At the time, the XIs were about the fastest bows on the market. I don't even remember what model his was, but it had Miles Keller's name on it. If you guys don't know who Miles Keller is, he killed a boatload. He killed more deer than a local interstate in his career, and he did it before people were going to big name high fence areas, and we'll talk about that next. But bow speeds were just not what they are now. A bow that was shooting 300 feet per second was a fast bow, and they weren't as efficient as what they are now. So you were losing a lot of energy and stuff like that just by reducing the draw weight and the draw length and things like that. So Matthews Solo Cam was one of the first really radical fast bows, because it was a draw specific cam, so it was really efficient at the shorter draw lengths. So that was something really new at the time. Something else about bows that was a lot different back then was the let off. Now we get these bows here got 75, 85%. You can even get bows that were 99% let off for some, and you didn't see that kind of let off back then. 55% was about the most you saw when I first started hunting. You started seeing a few that had 65% let off. So let off was something that you just didn't see above 55 to 65% back in that time. Something else that you didn't see was rotating draw modules and adjustable draw lengths. Some of them had them and some of them didn't, but I know a lot of guys who shot 29-inch draw lengths because that's what the bow shop had, and that was what a lot of us shot draw lengths that were way too long because we bought bows that didn't have adjustable draw mods on them, and we couldn't adjust them ourselves, so we just shot them that way. So talking about the Miles Keller thing, back then we had guys like Dan Fitzgerald and Miles Keller, Noel Feather, the poaching son of a bitch, and Stan Potts. These guys were going out and making hunting videos back then. And this is back when you could go to a video store. So you could go to Blockbuster and rent hunting videos. I remember going to Blockbuster and renting Fitzgerald's Passing Through and some of those stuff like that. So the world was a different place 30 years ago when you could go to any Blockbuster and rent a hunting video. I doubt you could do that today. So, well, there are no Blockbusters left, but that's another thing that's changed. But these guys didn't go to high fence areas. They went to land that they leased. They went to public land. They killed young bucks. They killed does. They killed turkeys with their buck. They killed. The hunting video and the hunting industry back then was just fledgling, and they didn't go to those kind of high fence hunting areas. It just didn't happen. Even Team Realtree, when they first started, and some of those guys that were very, very first started hunting, they had access to a lot of really good land, but they weren't going to these canned hunts and these high fence hunts. So that's something that's really, really changed over the years. Is just you don't see these guys. You didn't see those guys back there going on those canned hunts. And that leads us to our next thing. Something else that we didn't do back then was herd management. When I first started hunting, we shot whatever deer you could shoot. You didn't hold out for a big buck, and you didn't even here, there was no conversation about herd management. You know, I didn't learn to judge a deer's score or to judge a deer's age until quite a bit later on in my life. At that point, if you'd have told someone you were a trophy hunter, they would have laughed at you. You know, everybody was a meat hunter. That's why you hunted, and that's what it was about. You just didn't hold out for a mature deer, whether it was a doe or a buck, either one. You shot the first deer that came in on you, and we shot a lot of young bucks, and we shot a lot of young does, you know, does that were a year, 2 years old. We shot a lot of small ones and stuff like that. And this is an area that has really improved over the years, is herd management. You know, we just didn't do it back then. It was something that nobody really preached and nobody really talked about back then either. So herd management wasn't even a subject of conversation back then. So getting back to equipment, another thing that we didn't have back then was good flashlights. We had just old crappy flashlights. I remember starting out with flashlight that you could barely see the ground on. And going to and from your tree stand, it really wasn't an issue. But getting to blood trailing a deer, we used a lot of lanterns and a lot of propane lanterns. The propane lanterns seemed to really make the blood just glow, made the blood just shine. And I don't know why, but the propane lanterns, the Colemans, just those were the best thing for finding deer, you know, finding blood. Now we've got these super bright LEDs, and you can just light up the whole woods with them and stuff like that. And I mean, I don't know how many blood trails I lost due to poor light, and had to come back the next day and was able to pick the blood trail up, and it'd be a really good blood trail, just didn't have the light. The lights were expensive too. So if you wanted a light back then that was really high quality, you either used a Coleman lantern to do your blood trailing. And I remember my dad had a coon hunting light that he used. It went on your head. I can't remember how it was set up, but it had maybe the battery clipped to his belt, but it had one of those little 6-volt batteries that, you know, weighed 5 pounds, and that thing was really, really bright, but it's also pretty high dollar for the time. So flashlights and lights at the time were just not very high quality, and they just weren't very good for trailing unless you had a Coleman lantern or something that was usually high dollar. Another thing that we really didn't have, I remember when my dad bought his first Realtree Camo jacket, and he let me wear it fishing, and I got car sick, motion sickness on the way there, and I threw up on his brand new Realtree jacket. He hadn't even worn it yet. He let me wear it because it was cold out that day. We were going crappie fishing, and I got car sick and threw up on his brand new Realtree jacket. And why he didn't beat me, it shows how much he loved me, because he should have beat me. Realtree Camo was very new at the time. There was another camo that was called Tree Bark that had a lot of blue in it, you know, and we just didn't understand how deer saw back then. Now we know blue shines like a diamond to a deer, but it had a lot of blue and grays in it. And mossy oak eventually came onto the scene, but some of those old patterns, the old real trees and mossy oaks, that Tree Bark was terrible, but the old mossy oaks and Realtree were great patterns, but they were brand new at the time and really expensive. We wore a lot of military camo. My first few years of hunting, my dad went to a military surplus store and bought me military camo, and that's what we wore. And I remember my dad wearing a lot of red plaid wool. Him and his hunting buddy both wore a lot of red plaid, and I really wish I had some of that stuff left, because that stuff was high quality stuff, really warm stuff. And now we know that it worked, because deer can't see red that well, and it just broke up their pattern, so it worked really well because of that. But we just didn't have really high-tech camo like what we got now. I'm looking at my cabinet over here with my camo clothing in it, and I see multicam, I see Realtree, I see mossy oak, some of the old hardwoods, and I've got some British military camo in there. I still have a lot of military camo that I use, and that's just, I like the military camo because it's what I grew up wearing. But we just didn't have access to, well, there wasn't any of this camo like you see now, like the high dollar stuff that you see out there with these just really super cool patterns on them and stuff like that. So we just didn't have it. Another thing we really didn't have was scent killer. You know, you couldn't go to Walmart and buy soap that was specifically designed for washing your hunting clothes in, and soap that was specifically designed for taking a shower in, and there was no spray to spray yourself down. You know, we washed our clothes just using no soap at all. And I remember, I don't know why, my dad had us take shower with Ivory soap, and I don't know if it was because it's 99% and had no oils in it, because Ivory soap has no oil, almost no oils in it. So I don't know if that's why we used Ivory soap or what it was, but we always showered with Ivory soap back then instead of the scent killer. And when we went out, we would use cover scent like raccoon pee and I can't remember what different cover scents we used, but we would spray down with spray our boots and pants with raccoon urine and cover scents like that, to cover our scent. Another thing that a lot of my dad and his friends did was made their own cover scents at home. I remember Dad taking oaks and boiling them in distilled water and stuff like that, and making some sprays there. And I remember them basically, when we got out of the truck at some spots, we would go and walk up to a pine tree and just turn your back and just rub it like a bear scratching its back, and then just take a rubber branch and get it all over you and stuff like that. And using cedar, we would store our clothes in a cedar cabinet, and put cedar wafers in there as well to make those clothes smell more woodsy and things like that. And I knew guys who took bags full of garbage bags full of leaves and stuff from their yard, and would put in there, and then put their hunting clothes on top of it to get that clothes on there. So we didn't have these readily made deer scents, dirt scents, and cover scents like that. So we had to improvise and had to make our own. Another thing that we didn't have, I didn't buy one of these till I was probably in my 20s, late 20s, was a trail camera. There were no trail cameras back then. You had to do your scouting the old-fashioned way. You know, you had to go out and you had to find trails. You had to be able to read sign. And I'm very, very fortunate that I had some mentors that were able to teach me to read sign in the most basic way. You know, tell a fresh track from an old track, and things like that. And you really had to scout to find your deer and to find what they were doing. So I'm really actually happy that I grew up without trail cameras, because I have those skills, and I'm passing those skills on to my son as well. But we still do use a lot of trail cameras because the advantage is just huge. So there were no trail cameras. I remember a friend of mine's dad bought a thing called a trail timer, and it was this little box you'd put on a tree, and it had this tripwire that would come out of it, and it had a clock on it. And when an animal would come by, it would hit that tripwire, and it would stop the clock. So you could tell an animal come by here at 7 a.m. and the rope, the tripwire is laying on this side, so he must have been coming from that direction. Then you could kind of read the signs and go, okay, it was a doe, or if you sound, okay, it might be a big buck because I found a big heavy print here. So you still had to do a lot of it. It was rudimentary, but it was better than nothing. At least told you something came by and tripped that tripwire. And then we got into trail cameras when they first came out. They had film in them. So you had to take them out, you had to put them out, you had to put the film in them, load up the film. You had to go get them, you had to bring them home, you had to take the film out without ruining it, you had to take it to an hour, or you had to take it and get it developed and then bring it back, and you had all these pictures you would go through. So trail cameras have come a long way in the last 30 years, and they're a vital tool. But I am really glad that I actually didn't grow up with those, because I am glad that I have the ability to read sign and do basic scouting on my own without the trail cameras. So those are some of the things that I've seen in the last 30 years of bow hunting and being around the archery industry, and I'm sure I've forgotten some, so I may end up making a part 2 of this, and I would love to hear what you guys have seen and the changes that you've seen. I don't care if you've been hunting for 5 years, you've been hunting for 50. I'd like to see what kind of changes you've noted in your career as a bow hunter and hunter in general, and just I'd love to see the comments of what you guys have seen. Those are always things that I find very fascinating and very cool. I'm a student of history, and I love history, and the history of archery and where we've come has really been on my mind lately after that conversation with Kyle the other day. So put your comments below. I'd love to hear from you guys and see what changes you've made. If you'd also want to hit us up on social media, We're on Facebook and Instagram under Ike's Outdoors. So hit us up there and tell me what kind of changes you've seen in your career as a hunter. And give us a like, give us a follow, give us a share on these videos. And if you haven't, please subscribe. And until next time, we will see you guys.